Janice. 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 Is this a mic?
Yeah. Oh,
Just go for
I guess it's a private recording.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Williamsport City Council meeting. It's Thursday, April 14th, 2022. We're in Trade and Transit 2. Please rise for the invocation by Councilman Randy Allison, followed by the flag salute and roll call.
Heavenly Father, we gratefully come before you tonight. Grateful that we have the opportunity to come together, represent the citizens of Williamsport. And we have the responsibility to make decisions on their behalf. And we all want the same thing, Lord, and that's growth in our city, peace in our city. We want love in our city, Lord God, between each other, above all. And Father, we pray that you'll help us to make wise decisions on the things on our agenda and the business of the city, but also to be able to encourage a spirit of neighborliness, a spirit of acceptance, a spirit of community, Lord, throughout our city, so that we can prosper in every way, Lord, not just in material things, but as human beings and in spiritual things. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Frank, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Allison,
Here.
Mr. Mackey,
Here.
Mr. Pelisi,
Here.
Ms. Mealy is absent, Mr. Bider,
Here.
Mrs. Katz is absent, Mr. Yoder.
Here. We have a quorum of 5. All right, item 3, approval of city council meeting minutes from March 31st, 2022. Is there a motion and a second to approve?
So moved.
Is there any discussion on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. We will move to item 4, a presentation from eConsult Solutions for a 5-year financial strategic plan. I'll turn it over to Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good evening, President Yoder, members of council and administration. Tonight, we have with us Melissa Wright from eConsult. As everyone is aware, eConsult's been working on our 5-year strategic plan, financial strategic plan for about a year or so now, a little over a year. And obviously, this is a key piece to what we're doing here with the administration and council and moving the city forward. And one of the really important pieces to it is that DCD funds this. And in the recommendations, they fund 70-30. So 70% is funded by DCD and 30% by the city. So that's another aspect to this that's good for the city and the citizens of Williamsport. So at this point, I'll turn over to Melissa Wright to present their findings in the 5-year strategic plan with the recommendations.
Good evening, Ms. Wright, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm gonna wait for my savior over here to come handle these tech issues. While he's doing that, I just want to say thank you, Council President Yoder, the rest of City Council, Mayor Slaughter, and all of your administration. One, for having us here to present our findings to you, but also for all of your help as we've been compiling these and for your interviews, your insight, et cetera. I'll keep going in the meantime. But so at a high level, the strategic management planning program is to establish short and long-term, primarily financial, and also some managerial objectives to strengthen the fiscal capacity of the city. So there are 5 steps: the financial condition assessment and the financial trend analysis. which we came to you and presented in the fall of last year, the management audit, which we presented in December of last year, and then finally the multi-year plan adoption and the multi-year plan implementation, which looks 5 years into the future. So at the time of completion, it'll look through this year through 2026. And I would be remiss to mention my colleague Steve Ray, who is joining virtually tonight as well. Steve, feel free to jump in whenever. But our approach. So we reviewed the financial records and other documentation relevant to the city's financial position. It was supported by interviews with a lot of the folks in this room, which I again, thank you for. We looked at policies, procedures, organizational charts, financial history, specifically by department or by fund. And we presented those findings at key intervals. What did we find? The summary. Some millage rate increases and some cost containment strategies have enabled you all to maintain a relatively healthy financial position, which we talked about in our previous presentation. It is not an utterly dire situation. There is no need for an urgent financial plan as part of DCED standards. But there are some challenges ahead. In a couple of the last few years, there were deficits when accounting for transfers. And the real estate tax millage has been used as a tool to offset some of the stagnation happening in other revenue sources. One big thing that we identified is legacy costs, pensions, and otherwise that are putting pressure on the operating budget and increasing at a rate faster than revenues are. So all that to say, the deficits and deterioration of the fund balance will continue unless new revenue sources are identified. And that's part of what I'm here to talk to you about tonight. So this is the baseline general fund forecast. For those of you who can't see it, it is two diverging lines. So expenses are going up and revenues are not going down, but staying relatively flat. So without intervention, there is this growing structural deficit that we talked about. This is purely without intervention. And what I'm going to show you next is what it looks like with intervention. So what we've proposed is a scenario in which, very conservatively, looking to 2026, we maintain a fund balance greater than or equal to 0. And without intervention, you're down closer to somewhere between 25 and 30% by 2026. And with this intervention, you will be at a 0% fund balance in 2026. As I'm talking about this is a very, very conservative estimate. It only projects forward any of the immediate recommendations that we've made that are implementable within the next year or two. So some of the bigger recommendations, such as regionalization or looking for other opportunities to share costs, any contract negotiations or cost savings realized through that, none of those things are represented in this analysis here. So the key findings, population decline and blighted housing stock are slowing revenue growth relative to general fund expenditures. Some staffing shortages in key areas necessary to increase revenue, so community and economic development, finance and recreation would be helpful, and addressing those would create an opportunity to bring in revenue. We also identified some opportunities to put in place some long-term processes and systems that could help manage services and capital expenditures. So thinking about being really strategic about fleet replacement. And then, as I mentioned previously, opportunities for savings by reducing sharing services and across the region. We're all here without masks tonight, but COVID is still around, and it's disrupted city operations. And no one knows what their future is going to hold. So there is going to be like a need for flexibility, adaptability, and also a little bit of an ability to imagine what's happening next and be able to envision the future before it happens. We're in a really unique opportunity right now to leverage some of the shifts societally. And I think Williamsport is really strategically placed geographically, but also just circumstance-wise to capture some of what's happening. So key recommendations that came out of this: one, review the existing cooperation agreements, And those should be reviewed periodically. I think that there are some opportunities, one, to expand over time. So things like that were not included in that graph that you saw. But also to think about what the share is, and review those to make sure that the share is accurate between the two municipalities. Another opportunity we identified was the opportunity to cut labor costs. Of course, this is not an easy thing to do. It's not something that happens overnight, but something that is, if you go back to the financial audit that we shared, it's a very significant portion of the general fund budget. Some operational and managerial things that we identified were retaining key professional employees within the city. There's a lot of knowledge and expertise amongst the staff and the departments. And sometimes those folks are maybe the only person in their department. So there's really a key necessity to be able to make sure that some of those folks are retained and thinking strategically about how benchmarking is done for other salaries across municipalities nearby. Research has shown that it can cost anywhere from 50 to 200% of someone's salary to search for a new replacement, onboard them, et cetera. So it's really going to be important to retain key professionals and create some succession planning for folks who may be nearing the end of their professional career. And then this last one, lobby for a county reassessment. I know that this is something that is not directly in your control, but I know that you all are already doing a lot of work with economic development, with the land bank, and some of that will bring new properties back onto the tax roll. But for everything that you do that increases property values in Williamsport, I'm sure you all know you're not capturing the value until there's a reassessment. And that goes for not only bringing some of those blighted properties back into good condition, but all of your park investments, everything like that. We've done work that shows that properties located near green space or a park have a 7 to 9% property value premium. So those houses are just worth more. So all of the investments that you're making, you're not fully able to realize reap the benefits of it without that county reassessment. Economic development, decrease red tape. We've heard, I should call this make things more business friendly. It's not necessarily red tape, but modernizing some things, investing in software and systems that will allow folks to transact business without physically going someplace will be really important. Addressing blight, which I've already mentioned, and then expanding the role for community and economic development, as that is like a central piece of being able to forge the path forward into the future in terms of addressing and growing revenue for the city. I'm gonna pause, and does Steve, who's on Zoom, does he have the ability to like speak or? Okay, Steve, do you have anything you want to jump in with before I take questions?
Sure, Melissa, thanks. And again, thanks to the council and the mayor and the whole administration for the cooperation and the support that you provided as we were prepared, as Melissa and the team were preparing this report. We enjoyed our interactions with all of you and are encouraged by the way you're working together and the creativity you're using as you look at things. I think one of the interesting things about this study at this time is that it's coming out at a time whenever you're also contemplating how you're spending the ARPA money that has come in, and had the opportunity last week to have the mayor on a panel with us in Harrisburg at the Pennsylvania Economic Development Association. And we were talking there about the fact that you've identified investments to make with those dollars, things like the land bank, things like investing in parks and recreation, things like shoring up the flood levees and all those sort of things. All of those are great long-term strategies and good uses of those investments. Obviously, there are going to be some costs that you have to bear, all of that. But this report is coming out at a time, and this plan is coming out at a time when you have some flexibility. I think the key on that is not to just rely on those dollars to patch holes, but think about them as investments, continue to make the improvements in cost savings and economic development and other activities, and use those funds to help provide a bridge and investments into the future. With that, I'll stop. Again, I think we were, given, where you are and what you have been through. I will say this is the first time we've done an STMP coming off of a pandemic, and it's unique to try to project out forward. But we're encouraged by what we see, and we think there are opportunities for good things in Williamsport. So glad to take any questions.
Are there any questions at this time by members of council? Okay, keep going.
That is literally all I have for you.
That's the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought there was more.
But I will say that we do have the full report for you all. So if you, as you are digging in, if you have questions as you're reading it, please feel free to follow up with them. Or if now that you know that this is the end of the presentation, you have more questions, feel free to bring them on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And I would just add too that working with DCED, sort of the next step as well is for the administration and council to work together out of the recommendations and set up a priority list. Because the goal for us collectively would be to get that list to DCED for them to start identifying, hopefully providing funding. And so that's sort of the next step for us is to take, obviously there's a lot of recommendations, a lot of stuff for us to digest initially here, but once we've had a chance to sort of read through that and digest it, we'll create a priority list and then get that to DCED for their consideration on what projects they're going to fund. Thank you.
Of course.
Since we're at the end of the presentation, does anybody have any questions or comments? Mr. Pelisi, and then we'll go to Ms. Mealy.
Nope, no question. Just want to say thank you very much for that presentation. It looked very well put together, and I'm really looking forward to delving further into the full report.
Ms. Mealy, you had a question.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks, Melissa, and thanks for making the trip here to talk to us. We appreciate it. My question, well, is both for you and for Derek. When we're talking about priority projects that we can get to DCED in hopes that they will fund them, what do we think out of this report is something that we could get funded by the state? I mean, just out of the gate, I guess what form does it take when we're making an ask like that?
Right. So the deputy secretary, when he was here a few weeks ago, he literally just said, get whatever we collectively come up with, just get it in front of him. So basically you take the report, the recommendation. From my understanding, there's a form from DCD. They know we went through the stamp program. You get that to them, that formal request via the stamp program. We say this is a recommendation from eConsult from their stamp program that they identified. We get that to DCD for their consideration. So from my understanding, it's really as simple as that.
But I mean, for instance, we can't go to DCD and say we need to reassess. In our
Oh,
county.
for the,
Right.
no, right, no. So
But yet, I mean,
for
like,
example,
there's certain
like,
things they're not going to do.
right. Yeah. So no, we can't do that.
Right.
But for example, like the software, right?
Yeah,
So if we
okay.
look at new software, we could say, hey, we're looking at new HR software. This was a recommendation. We think it's obviously going to increase efficiency in the city. And then, DCD says, okay, we agree. They'll do 70%.
Got it. So what we need to do, I suppose, is go through the recommendations and find quantifiable
Right.
items that we can put a value to that we can personally undertake that aren't a matter of countywide will,
Exactly.
for
Right.
instance.
Right.
Which is not necessarily a narrow list, but it's a slightly narrower list, things that you can pin down like that in terms of economic development and in terms of, right. But the software obviously is a great start. Just wanted to be sure there wasn't some sort of magic
yeah.
magic pill out there that I wasn't aware of. That'd be awesome. All right, thanks. That was everything.
So two questions, one to follow up kind of on Liz's point. So, and as a part of the report, there is a proposed timeline with a particular order. Can you speak
Yeah.
to how that was put together, the thought process of how that goes together? Because I mean, taking things outside of our control off of that, I mean,
Sure.
there may be a particular approach or priority list in front of us. Maybe not though, so.
Yeah, so the way that things are prioritized is, it's a little bit of a combo of, one, what are the quick wins that folks can achieve? So some of those were things that were slated for first quarter, like really easy wins. We've found that traditionally that's really important in terms of creating momentum and just like letting folks know that things are happening. Some of those operational changes are also a little bit easier to implement, which is why they're first. Some of the bigger things do require like DCED funding, which obviously we know that like no government moves quickly. So to get those things in line, it takes a little bit of time. There's also some planning that goes into some of those things. So the preparation work was part of the consideration for things that are quarter 2, quarter 3, even later than that. Strategically, all of those things can happen more or less at any time, as long as you all are able. But in terms of planning to do something successfully, we think we've mapped those out in a way that gives you the time that you need. So anything that's quarter 3, I would say plan, it takes 9 months to like stand that up. Some of those things have already started to happen since the time that we've started this process. So obviously those things can continue to happen. Did you?
And there's one more piece of that too. As far as the recommendations, there's no maximum, there's no cap. So we can go to DCD, for as many as we need. So it's not like they say, once you get to 10, we won't fund anymore. So there's no maximum amount. I mean, they can't guarantee they're going to fund any of them, but there's also no limit either. So that's a nice piece to it as well.
Is there a time limit on how long do we have to submit to, I mean, do we have like what, 2 years, 5 years, 10
No,
years?
I don't think so. From my understanding, no, there's no timeline.
Okay.
And these recommendations can continue on indefinitely from my understanding. Yeah. So.
Okay. No, that's good to know. There's some good ideas in here. There's a number of things that I think we've been openly talking about for the past couple of years. There's a substantial amount of that in here. I think it shows that we've been on the right track and a lot of where our thoughts and ideas are, which is very good. And with this, we can get funding for it 100%. We should certainly get on that sooner than later, though. Collaboratively, before a lot of us were here, I mean, Mayor Slaughter, when we were talking about economic development efforts last year, we found studies from 10 years ago that are sitting there and nothing ever happened with them. We should make sure we don't repeat history is all I'm getting at. So, and we've done a good job the past couple of years of not doing that. Let's keep that up. So.
Well, I think one of the keys to that, not to weigh ourselves down with studies, but as we've all been saying, is to move from here to an economic development study that builds on this as quickly as possible, because as we know, we have funds to put into economic development. And then of course we have the support of DCED in this endeavor. So the more quickly we can move on that, the more quickly we can, I think, really attempt to take advantage of some slightly opportunity changing funds that we happen to have.
I would agree. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Very much
you.
enjoyed the presentation. We appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Okay, moving on, item 5, limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no requests tonight. Item 6, appointments. First off, we have the Redevelopment Authority, Mr. Don Lundy, replacing a term starting on today, the 14th of April, 2022, ending January of 2023. Mayor Slaughter, I'll turn it over to you
Yes,
again.
good evening again, President Yoder, members of council. What you have before you for your consideration is Mr. Don Lundy for appointment to the Redevelopment Authority. Mr. Lundy has been a resident of the city for many years now, has significant experience, particularly in the industrial and commercial space, but also residential. And I believe that he would be a good appointment and a good addition to the RDA, given his experience and background, both personal and professional. And he was interviewed during finance.
I'll turn it over to Ms. Mealy from
Yep.
Finance.
Yeah, we did speak to Mr. Lundy, and he clearly has both a passion and some strong opinions about the city's economic future and ways in which we should pursue it, which I think are important for the redevelopment authority. We did discuss briefly that we are setting a new series of goals for the redevelopment authority that are perhaps of a much greater, that we hope will be of a much greater scope than the role that it's played in the city over the last couple of decades. And Mr. Lundy was excited to be on board for that. I think there were only two of us, and only Randy and I were able to make the finance committee meeting, but both of us felt that he would be a strong candidate, that he is a strong candidate for the redevelopment authority, and that we certainly should accept his, take advantage of his willingness to serve. That said, the one recommendation that I made moving forward is we have one other vacancy that we need to fill on the redevelopment authority board. And I think we have 2 out of 5 individuals on the redevelopment authority that have a substantial number of business interests in the community. And it would be my recommendation that the next appointment that we make be someone unlikely to be conflicted in most decision-making processes, because I think we don't want to ever put ourselves in a position in which we might not have a quorum to vote on the authority. But with that said, Mr. Lundy is an excellent candidate, and as he stressed, has personally moved on economic development in a way that we're hoping to do that, with the authority, which I think will serve us well.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Mr. Allison, anything to add from finance?
Councilwoman Neely covered it well. He's ready to go, and he is very enthused about it, and can't wait to, all the things we talked about, he talked about, so it'll be great.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments from other members of council? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank. We need a motion in a second, sorry.
So move.
Second.
Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Ryder,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. And we'll turn it back over to you, Mayor. Our second appointment is Andre Phillips, a reappointment for a 5-year term starting today, ending January 3rd, 2027. And is Ms. Phillips here?
No, because I
Okay.
wasn't sure what we were going to.
Gotcha. Okay.
So.
I got you.
So yes, again, good evening again. For your consideration is Ms. Andre Phillips, to appointment to the Water and Sanitary Authorities. Ms. Phillips has been a long-standing member of the authorities. She's doing a great job. I spoke with Mike Miller. He's very pleased with the board as a whole, and with Ms. Phillips as well. So she reached out, and I spoke with her, and she would like to be reappointed, and I'm obviously very thankful that she is continuing to serve in this capacity.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. So we typically interview Water and Sanitary Authority appointments at separate functions. We didn't get to do that this week. And my apologies. We had some brief email chatter back and forth about just interviewing her here tonight. She wasn't able to make it due to not closing that loop. So we can table this for 2 weeks if we do want to interview her, but she is also a reappointment. So knowing her, I feel personally comfortable reappointing her, but I'll let other members of council speak if they wish to defer to go through a formal interview process. Ms. Mealy.
I mean, I would suspect that we all feel comfortable, especially with the reappointment and a fair knowledge of the candidate. The only question I would have is, I didn't think it was so much precedent as somewhat of a requirement that we were interviewing candidates through the full idea council as part of an action we took against the prior mayor.
So I thought it was too. I talked to Norm and Mr. Allison here beside me, and it actually isn't. So.
Then it would be my opinion that perhaps we should just begin sending water authority members to the committee unless we have, unless we have a good reason to act otherwise. That's good, because that was a difficult requirement we were meeting for a while.
Understood.
That said, I suppose it's up to everyone else.
Yeah.
Ms. Phillips also didn't go before committee, so I would be fine with either plan to have her come in for an interview.
Other members, one way or the other?
I'm comfortable to vote, yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, motion to second. I forgot to ask again.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any other comments? Hearing seen none, Mrs. Franklin, the motion, please.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Mayor Slaughter, for bringing both of those forward. We're going to jump around a little bit. We're going to go down to item 14, land development for West Pharmaceuticals on Reach Road. And I'll offer my apologies to anybody that is in attendance. I thought that both of those were going to be here as well. So thanks for bearing with me. Mr. Nar, good evening, sir.
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council. What I present to you tonight is a land development request from West Pharmaceuticals. It is located at 2921 Reach Road. They are proposing an 11,445 square foot building addition to their facility and redoing the parking. The proposed parking will be 174 standard parking as well as 2 handicap. It does meet all the requirements. This was reviewed by the city engineer, myself, as well as it was reviewed by Lycoming County Planning. You have the comments in front of you. The plans you have in front of you are corrected plans already. It was also reviewed by planning and both gave positive recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. And motion in a second.
So moved.
Second.
I promise I'll get that right at some point tonight. Is there a representative from West here?
We have a representative from Larson Design Group.
From Larson Design Group, great, okay. Are there any questions or comments from members of council on this land development? Ms. Mealy?
The only question I have is the one that I generally ask when we're looking at parking lot revisions. This does meet the 10% landscaping requirement.
Yes, it does.
Okay. All right.
They're one of the first things that I look at as far as those type of percentages.
Yes, just, I didn't see any landscaping really accounted for in the parking lot design, so I was just. wanted to
It's
double check.
based off of their green space and what they have as far as.
Got it.
existing.
So there's green space in the rear of the structure then, is that?
Correct.
Right. Understood.
Any
We
other
don't-
comments or questions?
Just one quick
Did you have
follow-up.
another one?
We don't have any requirements in terms of actual landscaping to provide shade or anything like that, or stormwater
It's
runoff?
all existing. The only thing that they are just doing is basically resurfacing it because they're doing the actual addition of the building.
Mhm.
They just put that in there, basically showing that they're well above when you do a land development plan, they have to show what the certain requirements are. So that was something that's grandfathered in, so they're not required to have those planting as far as trees and stuff like that, because it's an existing, the only thing they're doing is just resurfacing in that. And we do not require anybody to do landscaping for an existing structure as part of those land developments. If it's a new one, then yes, all they're doing is surfacing the parking lot, restriping it is basically what they're doing.
Okay,
So, and as far as the addition of the building, and the reason why they identify that is because when you add an addition, there's a certain amount of parking that may be required. They may not meet that, so then they would have to go before that.
Mhm.
But they're just showing the fact that, listen, they have 174 regular, they have the 2 handicapped as required, so it's an existing facility and it's nothing that is required.
okay. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Allison?
Thank you. President Yoder, excuse me. Is this, do you happen to discuss at all? Is this related to just a space needs requirement, or are they expanding?
They're just expanding to the facility, and with the growth of the company as part of what they feel is more
So it
efficient.
could be increased
Yep, correct.
jobs as well.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item 15, a land development for Old City Land, 225 East Third Street. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Motion and a second. Mr. Nar?
Yes, good evening again. What I'm presenting to you is a land development request. It's called Old City Development Phase 1. It is brought before you as far as Pine Ridge Construction LLC, and what they are requesting to do is build a 3-story, 12 rental commercial units, as well as 12 for sale townhomes within the facility. This was reviewed by both city engineer as well as the stormwater authority, as well as myself, and it went through county planning. The comments that you have before you as far as the county plans before you are corrected copies. It did go through the city planning. Everything was reviewed, meets all the requirements. And at this point in time, I can answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from members of council on this proposed land development? The only question I have, Mr. Nar, we kind of talked about this briefly beforehand, is the issue of I think the border of the lot and the street. Can you speak to where we're at as far as getting that rectified?
Yeah, and it has been brought up. Basically, if you realize when we did the gateway to the college, as part of that, there was a deed of dedication of land that was required. It was noted that the formal land dedication might not have been finalized. So at this point in time, it is between the city solicitor as well as the college. They're going to finalize this. So basically what the council can do is, and my recommendation is that we do approve the land development plan, condition on no building or zoning permits will be issued until the deed of dedication has been finalized and recorded. So it's in its final stages. It was just, I think, was an oversight when they did phase one as far as the gateway.
Okay. Norm, anything to add related to?
No, I was in touch with the
Okay.
college. The mayor's aware that they're going to be preparing the deed. There's 2 deeds that have to be prepared. They're working on it.
Okay. We have a timeline or?
No, I didn't set a time, so I didn't realize this was related to the other project, but I'll let them know.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Mr. Allison?
We're excited about this, excited that it's a private developer as well as working with the college. This has been that whole redo down that part of the college and for the whole neighborhood there, and actually the whole East 3rd Street Gateway project has been far beyond what we could have dreamed up or expected when this whole thought process about that part of the city developing occurred. And seeing it take actually brick and mortar and stone and shovels in the ground and a lot of new construction is it's exciting. It builds momentum. It's everything that we need to continue development in that area. And we do appreciate all that Lycoming College has done. They've been more than a good partner. They've been an excellent partner through all this. And it's just, I just think we're all grateful and looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. I would second everything you said, 100%. Ms. Mealy?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually, the college really has been a catalyst in that area. And we've been fortunate to develop that sort of relationship with Lycoming College over the last decade. It's been a game changer, not just for that neighborhood, I think, but for the city as a whole. And will continue to be, but to have an active relationship between an institution, a nonprofit like that within the city and city government is unusual, at least in our area. And I think will work out well for both parties, is working out well for both parties, but will especially in the long run. So we certainly hope to be able to move that along as much as possible.
Absolutely. No other questions that I see. Norm, to incorporate the recommendation from Gary, do we need to amend the land or the land development?
You wouldn't,
Well, just the motion itself. It should-
Yeah, I mean, do we need to amend the motion to incorporate that recommendation?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend to incorporate that recommendation from Gary on the deed?
Move it.
Second.
Move in a second. Any other questions or comments on that motion? All right, Mrs. Frank on the motion to amend?
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion to amend passes 6-0. Back to the main motion. Any final questions or comments? Hearing and seeing none. Mrs. Frank on the main motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, main motion passes 6-0. Thank you all. Item 16, land development. I'm gonna mess this name up, Revaport on 868 First Ave. Mr. Nar, I'll turn it over to you again.
What we present to you tonight is a land development request with Revapuri LLC.
There you go.
It's located at the corner of Maynard and First Street. It's currently, it came before council probably maybe about a year ago. There were 4 or 5 vacant lots. They did a lot consolidation for this reason for the land development plan. So what they are requesting is to construct a 3-story building with a 5,926 square foot footprint. The first floor will have the ability to have 12 rental units, commercial rental units. The second and third floor will have 4 apartments on each floor. There will be 22 standard parking spaces, 2 ADA compliant spaces, as well as landscape requirements, and they do meet the landscape requirements as well as the stormwater. It was reviewed by city engineer, stormwater authority, myself. It went before Lycoming County. The comments that you have before you have been corrected. We do have will serve letter from both the water and sewer to saying they have the ability to do that. It was reviewed also by planning. Everybody gave positive recommendation for your approval, and I do have a representative here.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Are there any comments or questions from members of council? Ms. Mealy?
Just a quick question. That area of the city still is combined sewer, correct?
Yes,
Okay, so I was going to say, to the extent, because Reach Road is not,
no.
correct? To the extent that we review land developments and the stormwater authority.
Anything we do with the land development, because again, it talks to stormwater, whether it be the combined sewer or individual. So,
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is, is the stormwater authority presenting it at this point? Maybe recommendations to parcels which lie outside the combined sewer area in the city in terms of potential BMPs?
Not at this time. We've
Okay.
spoken with them, and I know John Sanders and I have spoken with them, but nothing official at this time.
Okay, just because it seems like that when we have an opportunity, not like this one, but like the West Pharmaceuticals opportunity where they're already doing a substantial amount of work on the property, it would probably be inexpensive for them to put in some BMPs that would then benefit our.
And because of this being such a small project, it's something that we probably wouldn't be able to fit within that location.
Yeah, well, this
Yep.
location, I mean, this wouldn't work if
Right.
it's on the combined sewer, it doesn't matter. It just happened to occur to me this time, and I was asking whether or not we had a series of recommendations. The second question is, do you see there room for 12 retail spaces?
Again, you can have 5,000 square foot of commercial property. In other words, you can have one small business, for example, a hair salon, something small like retail, a small retail business that can go in there.
Got it.
But it just, what it does is it gives that ability to basically saying this is what he can do with that. Now, what'll happen
Okay.
is once the land development is approved, we've already been in the beginning conversations with both Joe Girardi, who's our building code official, as far as what's required and what's not. But they
Okay.
do have a footprint of the availability to put at least that in there
Wow,
on the first
interesting.
floor.
And that would be all facing forward onto Maynard Street, or it like?
They will, it will be coming off, you will come off of First Street. You can't come off Maynard. So it will
Because of
be.
the highway occupancy, okay. So the property will face toward First Street, or, sorry, I'm just trying to,
It'll face Maynard Street. So
Toward Maynard.
it will face that. So basically, it'll be set back in the corner. So it really kind of faces both of them as well.
okay, all right. Just sort of understanding. It's certainly exciting. Maynard Street has obviously been doing pretty well for the city of late, but it's neat to see some of those parcels a little closer to Third Street getting developed and kind of leading people down the street into.
And it is nice because it is in the CC zoning district. It's not in a residential district. So
Right. Yeah, which I suppose is nice for everybody involved, but good. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. Are there any other comments or questions from members of council? Hearing seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. We'll move to item 17, lot consolidation for Brett and Sue Johnson. Is there a motion and a second for this lot consolidation?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Nar.
what we have before you is a lot consolidation request from Brett and Sue Johnson. The property is located at 730 Wildwood Boulevard. There's 2 parcels. There's currently a business on there, which is a chiropractic office. They are requesting to combine them so that they can possibly look at putting an additional building on there for storage of their facility for the business use. And in order to do that, requires the lots to be consolidated as one so that there's no issue with setbacks as well as stormwater or anything like that.
Thank you, Mr.
It was
Nar.
reviewed by both county and planning as well, and positive recommendation.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Nar. Any comments or questions from members of council? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 18, subdivision and lot consolidation for 607 Cemetery Place and St. James Place. Mr. Nar, finally.
What we have before you is a lot consolidation subdivision request from Keith Weitzel. The proposed plan is to combine parcels 002-401, which will contain 6,624 square feet, with parcel 7,002-408. That lot containing 2,611 square feet. Basically, what he's doing is, if you're familiar with it, it's the old R.C. Smith building. If you've been up there and seen what he's done with it, he's paved the parking, he's done a lot of exterior stuff to the facility. What he's looking at doing is basically, it's a very large parcel. He's going to subdivide that, keep that, and he's looking for developers to develop the other parcel, which will be separated from that. Now, it did go before the zoning hearing board several years ago because of setbacks requirements, so it did meet that. And again, it is in the ML zoning district, so it's a fairly large lot that will be there for possibility of redevelopment versus just sitting there vacant. And that's why he's requesting to do the lot consolidation as well. It was reviewed by both county as well as planning and passed with a positive recommendation for your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Nar. Is there a motion in a second?
So moved. Second.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions from members of council on this tonight? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
yes,
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Nar, for your work this evening. We appreciate it. And thank you all for all the work that's happening in the city with all 5 of those items. It's great to see. All right, we'll move back up to items. We can do items 7 through 10 together if we want to. Is there a motion and a second to open discussion on items 7 through 10?
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. Turn it over to you, Skip. I can't mispronounce your first name. So.
Well, good evening, everybody. We've been talking about items 7, 8, 9, and 10 for a couple of weeks now. This is all to do with the reallocation of funds from different program years to program year 2021 for us to fund the fire trucks. I'll answer any questions that you may have. This is the final reading for that.
Thank you, Skip. Are there any final comments or questions from members of council on these 4 items? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
yes,
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, items 7 through 10 pass 6-0. Move to item 11. Mrs. Frank, if you would read that, please.
Resolution approving change order number 1 for Lowe's Park Playground Improvement Project.
Is there a motion, a second?
So moved.
Second.
Skip. Almost off the hook.
Good evening, President Yoder, members of council. Tonight, the Department of Community and Economic Development presents a resolution for your approval, which is change order number 1 for the Lowe's Park Playground Improvement Project. On March 17th, council approved a resolution to reject all bids and rebid that project. This change order is necessary to adjust Larson Design's original contract, which was in the amount of $31,655 for additional services to be provided for the rebidding and not so much the redesign, but the process of getting us through the process. Their change order request is $1,300, which will make their total contract cost $32,955. Just to inform the board, the ad was placed. The pre-bid meeting was held. The proposals were submitted, and on April 11th, the city clerk opened publicly the 3 bid packages. We did get 3 versus the original where we only had 1 that were submitted. They are now being reviewed by Larson for completeness and the solicitor for legal compliance. And we hope to have the council at your next meeting, a resolution to award the project. This was reviewed in finance and forwarded with a positive recommendation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Skip. This was reviewed in finance. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Mealy.
Yep, this was reviewed in finance and comes to you with a positive recommendation. It's probably it's a little bit of sort of post hoc catch up in the sense that we've actually completed the rebidding process and we have the new bids. We do have 3 bids now instead of just 1. Thanks to Larson rebidding the project, but obviously we've incurred the expenditure and now we are simply authorizing it. That said, the rebidding process, according to Mr. Memmi, did net us 3 bids instead of 1, but the net lowest bid didn't particularly change, correct?
The dollar
That is to say
amount
the cost is
still similar. We will take care of the financial issues in the 2022 action plan, which will be coming to you shortly with a request for additional CDBG funding to give us the sufficient funds to complete this project as it was originally designed.
So in other words, when we rebid it, we didn't change the scope of the project. We simply took on.
There really wasn't anything that we could cut out that didn't affect the project. You know, we're putting a top coat on a basketball court, new nets and support stanchions. We were putting in some more sidewalks, some benches, some trees, some new lighting. We were changing existing lighting to LED, and we were also then taking out old outdated playground equipment and actually putting in handicapped accessible facilities for children to play, and the surfaces will be the rubberized surfaces. We decided not to use a mulch. Just isn't conducive to people with handicap needs to be able to walk through, or it just doesn't give them a good surface. So we kept the project the same. We're going to find new money to fix the lack of sufficient funds to do it when this was originally thought of in 2018, I believe, or 2019. The numbers probably worked well, but with through inflation and everything else, we're seeing a bigger cost to it. We'll fix it with our CDBG funding. We have had 3 good bids. They're being analyzed and we'll bring them to you. And hopefully we can get this project underway in the next couple of months. There's probably about a 10-week lead time necessary to get playground equipment. So we're trying to move it as quickly as we can.
Thank you both. Are there any questions or comments from members of council on this one? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Viter,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Skip, thank you very much and have a good evening, sir. We'll move to item 12. Mrs. Frank, if you would read that short form, please.
Resolution awarding Northwest Levy System Cross Pipe Vinyl Design to Wood Environmental and Infrastructure Solutions.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Sander, good evening, sir. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. So this was discussed in finance on Tuesday. I'm giving the positive recommendation. This would award final design services to Wood Engineering, final design permitting and bidding for 7 of the worst cross pipes we have in our levee system that are in the Newberry section of town. Step back a couple of years in 2019, yeah. They already did preliminary design for these pipes. This would just be a continuation. And in their proposal, I think they have it going out to bid tentatively August of this year. So we did get 3 proposals for this endeavor. This was advertised for 3 weeks. We got 3 proposals, like I mentioned. This would be slip lining, excuse me, these cross pipes. Essentially taking a 3-foot diameter cross pipe and putting a smaller diameter and a smoother pipe inside to allow for the same capacity, as opposed to open cut excavation, which would be very costly, and given where they're at, could lead to troubles. So this was sent to our ARPA compliance folks at UHY, excuse me. And I spoke to them on Tuesday and they had no issues with it either. Let's see here. Those are the highlights, I guess. Let me know if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sander. This was reviewed in finance. Ms. Mealy?
This was reviewed in finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. Wood has obviously done, I believe, pretty much all of the design and evaluation work on the levee to date.
Correct.
This work, my understanding is there aren't very many firms in the United States that do the specific work that Wood does. That is to say that we'd only have a couple of options for the majority of the levee work that we've completed so far.
You could say that, and there's a certain amount of risk involved with this level of this type of project, so you wouldn't just want to give it to anyone. So they are in fact the most expensive. So I will mention the fact we have 3, I was going to say firm A was 42,000, firm B about 50,000, Wood was about 66,500. So,
Right.
but we have some strong pressure from insurance to get the levee fixed. So here we are.
Right. Well, I guess, well, that leads me to actually a question that I didn't have because we didn't have the information on Tuesday about the other bidders. Wood obviously has a lot of previous experience with the levee and is likely in a position to do significantly less work to arrive at the final design for the cross pipes, correct?
That would be accurate.
Do we know, did we ask why they're the most expensive firm?
I had a brief discussion and didn't go into specifics today with one of the engineers there, but I didn't ask specifically why were you at this and other firms at that?
Right.
I didn't get quite that far, but I did actually speak to them today.
But I guess my question is, do we have a strong reason for feeling that it would seem to me like it might be in our best interest, not only because so much of the work on the levee has been done with Wood, but just because I think diversity of firms across city projects is probably just a wise thing. Different eyes see different things.
So I guess.
So I'm assuming that we still want to keep the majority of the work with Wood because, as I said, they're one of the preeminent firms in the country for dealing with levee issues. But when we're splitting out certain small pieces of that work, should we perhaps in future look to diversify? I understand
Absolutely.
that the administration's recommendation at this time is to continue to work with Wood. And if that's a speed issue and all of that, that's fine. But smaller bites of the pie, so to speak, that can be taken on without knowledge of the full system, it would seem to me like perhaps we should be looking to diversify the firms we're working with.
Agreed. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously the Wood has worked with the city and the county for what, 10, 12 years now, I believe. And with the Army Corps themselves, they worked down in New Orleans and along the Mississippi River. There are other firms capable. I think in this particular case, given the situation that we're in,
right,
we need to act and be my recommendation. I'm not going to always favor, I'm not going to play favorites.
Right.
I have another proposal out right now for 3 of our pump station upgrades. And they haven't done any design work on them per se yet. So we'll see who we get. I forwarded it onto the world actually. Well, I always do, but
yeah.
So
Got it. No, I'm just
Yep.
checking because it seems to me, both clearly from a fiscal perspective, We are, of course, spending American Rescue Plan Act funds on this, but it's still not a bottomless amount of funding. So we still need to make certain that we're getting the best bang for our buck. And a $25,000 gap between the highest and lowest bidder and us picking the highest bidder seems like you could question that. All of that said, because Wood has the greatest level of familiarity with this particular area, and because we need to make it happen yesterday, it seems like they're our wisest choice. But I would encourage the administration to consider all proposals and make certain that we're getting good value and that we are getting a number of different eyes on different elements of the project. I
We've
think
had
moving forward.
in-house discussion to that exact effect
Okay.
recently as well.
Good, all right. As I said, finance forwarded the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Mealy. I would second a lot of and echo a lot of those sentiments. These are the 7 worst, as you had said, John, and with Wood's level of expertise and their intimate knowledge of the levy system, I think we can make the argument that there is added value with the added price point in this specific instance. But, to your point, Ms. Mealy, competition will very much down the road keep a lot of other vendors honest, so to speak, in a more blunt and direct way of putting it. And even Wood, we've got a longstanding relationship with them. They're a great partner, but nonetheless, competition would be a very, very good thing, even with the levy, with the largest issue we're facing. So I would agree with that. I think ensuring we introduce competition in a strategic and specific way that is not going to increase the level of risk, I think is a very good idea.
I actually had that
hope you
exact
agree
same
with that.
conversation with Wood today in regards to competition and, yep.
Yeah, that's good. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Pelisi, then Mr. Allison.
Just one quick comment. John, I know I usually beat you up over all the bidding and all the numbers and everything. I like everyone else. We like to stretch our dollars as much as we possibly can to get the value out of it. In tonight's case, I was pretty much going to ask you every single thing that Ms. Mealy already did. So I just didn't want you to think you were going to get off easy from me tonight. It was already said. So
Vince, I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I'm sorry.
it's okay.
I get picked on in the office too, trust me.
That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pelisi. Mr. Allison, you had a question.
I just, not a question, I just wanted to comment on the schedule that this is set at, but I totally agree with everything that's already been said. But this is a unique situation since it threatens our industrial park, and we don't want to compromise any of that. There's a virtual project kickoff on Monday, the 18th. Then there's 2 phases to be completed in May and June. But we get down to the final technical contract bids will be delivered August 1st. And then the project would be bid out by the 15th of August. So people have some idea about how long this is going to take. Although Wood said in the narrative that there's a chance that the time frame can be condensed based on review times by the city of Williamsport. So I think they've given us a little bit of space in there.
Yeah.
In case it's needed, but it might go quicker.
It may, some of it might be driven by the DEP permitting requirements.
Right, yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
So
If we can get to a contractor as early as August this year, we would show some folks who really are concerned.
yes,
That we're doing as
it's
diligently
going
as
to do all
possible.
those things that are much needed. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. Are there any other comments or questions from members of council? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey.
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes,
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 13, Mrs. Frank, we'll move on to that. If you would read that, please.
Resolution committing local match funding for a DCNR grant for the city of Williamsport Comprehensive Recreation Park Open Space and Green Infrastructure Plan.
Is there a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mayor Slaughter.
Yes, good evening again, President Yoder, members of council. What you have before you for your consideration is a resolution that's committing a local match for DCNR C2P2 grant, which is for our comprehensive recreation park, open space, and green infrastructure plan in the amount of, if we are fortunate enough to get the grant, would be a local match of $75,000. We've been talking about these grants for a long time now, both in our ARPA discussions and regular council meetings. And city council made it clear that they wanted the administration to continue to go after grants, which we are doing, both with DCNR, DCD, and other agencies. And so this is one that would update our comprehensive plan, which is significantly old at this point. And in order to get some DCNR funding, they want to see an updated comprehensive plan to include also some green infrastructure. It would include connectivity to the parks within the neighborhoods, to the recreational spaces, and obviously a bunch of other items within that comp plan. This was reviewed in finance and forwarded to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor Slaughter. I'll turn it over to you, Liz, for finance.
Yeah, hard not to forward this one with a positive recommendation. I mean, it's simply the local match. So, there's nothing that remarkable about that. If we're fortunate enough to get the grant, though, I think the process of doing a sort of a global look at our recreation, evaluating our needs, and creating a master plan going forward can be a huge benefit for the city. Most of the discussion, but I will defer to Mr. Allison, who actually led Tuesday's finance meeting, if I'm missing something. In fact, Randy, should I just defer to you in general? I haven't been. I've been talking as though I was the one in charge.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought you were in charge.
Sorry, Mr. Allison. I had no idea.
I'm putting a really good face on things. No, I asked Randy to lead it because I had some conflicts going on my end. So I wanted to just kind of listen and comment. But I think most of the discussion revolved around the exciting concept of not just a master plan for our parks, but a master plan for creating access to recreation within the city as well, which is a different concept than what we've looked at previously in other parks planning ventures. I know with CEDACOG, when we did a master plan for our 6 or 7 smaller parks in the city, we didn't talk about how people were to get to those parks or how we were going to try and create a user base for those parks. We just talked about how to make the parks cool, and that's an important question too. But the question of how to help citizens get to the parks, and I suppose to a certain extent how to create recreation in those parks that the citizens near them want to use is a big and important one, and hopefully we'll get a chance to evaluate that. Now, Randy, what did I forget?
Anything to add, Mr. Allison?
No, the grant's gonna be awarded in late fall in 2023, probably. Yeah, would get it then.
Right, it'd be awarded in late fall of 22, and then we'd start on it in 23. And it's being led by Delta.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you both. Are there any other comments or questions from other members of council? Okay, hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 19, except for filing the controllers report from December 2021. Is there a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
Any comments or questions on the controllers report? Hearing and seeing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion, please.
Mr. Allison,
Yes.
Mr. Mackey,
Yes.
Mr. Pelisi,
Yes.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Bider,
Yes.
Mr. Yoder.
Yes, motion passes 6-0. Item 20, announcements. The next regularly scheduled city council meeting will be held on Thursday, April 28th, 7 PM right here at Trade and Transit 2. Upcoming meetings, Tuesday, April 19th at 6:30 PM is our next HARB meeting. Wednesday, April 20th at 10 AM, blighted property. Thursday, April 21st at 10:30 AM, zoning hearing board. Tuesday, April 26th at 11:30 AM is public safety. 1 PM is finance. 2:30 PM public works. 4 PM transit oversight. Wednesday, April 27th at 11:30 is our redevelopment authority. And Thursday, April 28th at 7 PM is our next city council meeting. Are there any comments from members of city council tonight? Hearing seeing none. Are there any comments from members of the administration? Okay, are there any comments from members of the public? If you would be so kind as to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes. Good evening, sir.
My name's Frank Steckel, 619 First Ave, Williamsport. I had a lot of troubles getting hold of different people in the city government. I know that without City Hall there, it used to be pretty simple. You walked in, everybody was available. Now, you go to one office and door's locked. There's a phone, you call, nobody answers. You call again, you get a different department. I came up here tonight, the elevator doesn't go to the 3rd floor. Okay, I asked the girl on the 2nd floor, she says there's something wrong with it, it doesn't go to the 3rd floor. I walked up the steps, the door was locked. The only reason I got in was because somebody happened to be there to let me in. It almost seems like we're trying to keep the public out of the meeting almost. I mean, you tell me, is it an accident or is it going to happen again? You know what I mean? So I've been trying to get very difficult getting hold of people in the administration. I have different problems going on. I call the police department. It's very difficult. I don't want to embarrass anybody at this meeting. I'm going to give everybody till the next meeting to do their jobs properly in different departments, or I will be back here and I will be embarrassing people. Some of these embarrassments to me border on unethical, possibly criminal behavior, which I don't think the city needs another attorney general's investigation on her back. So other than that, I guess I don't have any. I like a promise though that you can access the 3rd floor during the meeting through the elevator, in case you're handicapped. I hope they bring the old City Hall back, tell you the truth. If there's a security issue, I think they can put a guy at the door just like the county does. Because you went in there and you could talk to anybody. Whether you have a police problem, you go there and there's the officer on duty. You go to the mayor's office, you go to codes, whatever. Now it's so scary. I'd like to do it. I would love to know if there's another city in this country where the police department is half a mile away from City Hall and their offices are scattered about. And if you want to talk to someone from code, you have to go a mile the other direction. I hope to God this isn't what they plan on doing in the future indefinitely. This is not a centralized City Hall. I don't know what the old building would cost to fix, but I've done construction my whole life. It can't be that horribly, terribly bad. You know what I mean? With the other City Hall, the old City Hall, there was a line of guys waiting to take it and they took it and they made a profitable enterprise out of it. I can't see what the problem is. They have some kind of magic wand that the public doesn't have, that they can't, do this. It seems like more and more there's an effort to keep people out of, being able to access city offices. Tonight, I couldn't even access a city meeting. I don't know if you know anything about that, Mr. Yoder? Okay, maybe you can look into it, right? It's another little problem I have too with council. I come in here and say things and nobody says anything. It's almost like maybe I'm just guessing, maybe the solicitor says, don't respond to anybody's problems at council. Just let it go. Maybe they'll go away. I remember Mr. Allison told me he'd have an answer for you the next week. He never did. It's on the record. If you don't want to be a politician, if you don't want to be serving the public, then don't join the club. Don't get elected to council. If somebody comes in with a problem, it shouldn't be, well, we don't have any comment. We're not going to say anything. It should be, we'll look into it and we'll see. We'll get back to you next meeting or whatever, some kind of you know what I'm saying, Mr. Yoder.
Yeah, understood.
Right.
Appreciate your comments and we'll look into it for the next meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments from members of the public? You're seeing none. Any comments from the news media? I don't think there are anybody here tonight. All right, I'll take a motion, a second for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening, all.